January 17th, 1945, 11:47 p.m., Torpon, Belgium. Sergeant Thaddeus Birchwood stood before 500 meters of absolute destruction. The railway bridge lay twisted in the frozen amblé of river steel girders, jutting skyward like broken bones. Behind him, 40 American trucks idled in the darkness, engines rumbling, headlights cutting through winter mist. Captain Elwood Merrick appeared beside him carrying a clipboard. "Trains need to cross at 0600. That gives you 6 hours, 13 minutes. Tad stared at the devastation. "Sir, I've never built a bridge in my life." "Good thing you won't have to." Merrick thrust the clipboard at him. "Bridge is already built. You just assemble it." The blueprints showed a bridge that looked nothing like the Victorian monument that had stood here yesterday. Simple, utilitarian, almost crude. "Sir, when were these drawn?" 1600 hours. Aerial photos at 1430. HQ drafted plans by 1500.
Parts loaded at Liège by 1630. You're looking at blueprints 7 hours old. Merrick's voice flattened. "Those trains carry ammunition. Third Army's got men rationing bullets since the bulge. Every hour delayed is men dying. Understand, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." "Then move." Tad looked at the blueprints, then at the ruins. His father's voice echoed from an Iowa barn 3 years gone. "Son, good enough beats perfect, if perfect never comes."
300 yards up the road, Oberstleutnant Caspar von Eisenhardt lowered his binoculars and smiled. 45 years old, an engineering lecturer before the war became his profession. He'd designed the demolition personally. 3 tons of explosives in calculated placements. The bridge pylons fractured at their foundations. The approach embankments mined and collapsed. Perfect work. His aide, Lieutenant Dieter Holtzmann, stood beside him. "Should we call artillery, destroy their trucks?" "No, let them work. I want to see them fail." Von Eisenhardt raised his binoculars again, watching American soldiers unload equipment under brilliant floodlights. Wasteful. Foolish. 3 months minimum to repair this, von Eisenhardt said with certainty. In winter, with frozen ground and ice formation, 4 months. Perhaps 5. We've bought the Reich time. He turned away from the light show, confident in his mathematics. The Americans were wealthy, yes, but wealth couldn't change physics. Couldn't make concrete cure faster, or bridge pylons rise from frozen riverbeds through enthusiasm alone. By morning, they would understand what German engineering had accomplished here. Corporal Virgil Denham found Tad staring at bridge sections being unloaded from Truck 7.
"First time seeing a Bailey?" Denham asked. He was 30 from Detroit, a Ford assembly line worker before the war. "What am I looking at? British invention, American production. Each panel's identical, made in Pennsylvania factories to tight tolerances. See those holes? Pins go through them. Stack panels, connect them, add decking. No welding, no custom fitting, just match numbers and bolt together." Tad examined the panels. They were being organized by some system he didn't understand yet. "This'll hold a locomotive. These bridges are carrying Shermans across Europe. The British tested one to failure at 80 tons. Denham grinned. "Ever assemble a corn harvester, international harvester with all the parts?" "Sure. Farm equipment came in pieces." "Same thing. You don't need genius. Just follow numbers. Panel 1A connects to 1B. System's designed so you can't screw up."
Denham showed Tad his toolkit. Standard wrenches, chrome-plated, well-used. 3/4-inch socket does everything. 1 wrench entire bridge. He handed Tad a wrench. "Welcome to modern warfare, Sergeant. It ain't about fighting better. It's about building faster." By 1 a.m., Tad understood the system. 300 men divided teams. Surveyors marked positions. Crane operators lifted panels. Assembly crews connected them. Decking teams laid roadway. Nobody did everything. Nobody needed to understand everything. Assembly crew, Alpha 12 men, 1 job. Match numbers, insert pins, tighten bolts. Panel 1A to 1B. Panel 2A to 2B. The panels were heavy but manageable. 4 men could position 1. "Pins," someone shouted. Tad grabbed steel pins and moved to where 2 panels waited, lined one up with the holes. "Hit it!" Sledgehammer down. The pin drove through with a metallic clang. 4 pins per junction. Move to the next. Repeat. His hands blistered within an hour. A kid from Brooklyn struggled with a misaligned bolt. "Shit, this won't seat. Use the pry bar," Denham called. "Lever them into alignment." The kid forced the panels together. The bolt slipped through. "See," Denham said. "System accounts for human error." British thought of everything. "How many of these you built?" the kid asked. "Lost count after 20. 6 in France in 1 week. After a while they blur together." Tad paused. 20 bridges. Probably more. But who counts? You build them, trains cross, you move to the next one. It's a job. At 2 a.m., Tad learned what abundance meant. He was hauling pins when his boot caught frozen cable.
He went down hard. His toolkit flew from his hands, tumbled over the embankment, vanished into the Amblev with a splash of ice. 30 wrenches. Gone. In Iowa, this meant disaster. His father's tools were precious, some inherited from his grandfather. You lost a tool, you faced consequences. Tad scrambled up, already forming apologies. Denham appeared. You okay? I lost the toolkit. It went in the river. So get another one. What? Truck 12. Supply section. They'll give you a replacement. Tad jogged to truck 12. The supply sergeant barely looked up. Need a toolkit. Lost mine in the river. Standard mechanics set? Yeah. The sergeant handed him a canvas bag. Sign here. Inside were 30 wrenches, pristine and new, still wrapped in oil paper. That's it? Tad asked. How many of these do we have? The sergeant checked his clipboard. 47 sets in this truck, 300 across the convoy. Tad walked back in a daze. 47 sets, in one truck. He found Denham and held up the new toolkit. They just gave me one. Didn't even care. Why would they? We got more tools than we need. The factory that makes these produces 1,000 sets a day. Tools ain't precious. They're just equipment. Tad thought about his father's wrench set. 3 generations using the same tools because tools were valuable, irreplaceable. Back home, a wrench set costs a week's wages. Back home, sure. But this is the army. We make so much that individual losses don't matter. You drop a wrench, get a new one. Section gets damaged. We got 50 spares. This is how you build fast. You remove waiting from the equation. Tad opened his new toolkit. The wrenches gleamed under floodlights. Perfect. Identical to the ones he'd lost. Completely interchangeable. Stop worrying about tools, Denham said. Worry about the bridge. At 3 a.m., von Eisenhardt returned to his observation post. Something nagged at him. The lights, the noise, the scale of activity. He raised his binoculars and felt cold fear. They weren't attempting a bypass. They were building 3 bridges, simultaneously, at different crossing points. Von Eisenhardt adjusted focus, trying to comprehend. The main site glowed under floodlights, a complete bridge already taking shape, rising from prefabricated sections that men bolted together with mechanical precision. But north, another crew constructed a second crossing. South, a third. 3 bridges. Not one careful reconstruction, but 3 simultaneous crossings using modular systems. He watched a crane lift a bridge section, watched workers swarm it, connecting it to the previous section. 12 minutes. Then they moved to the next. This wasn't construction. This was assembly, like building furniture from a catalogue. No custom engineering, no careful calculation. Just pieces fitting together in predetermined ways. It was crude, utterly lacking elegance. And it was working. Von Eisenhardt did mathematics in his head. Each section, 12 minutes, 3 bridges simultaneously started at midnight. No, his calculations must be wrong. He studied progress more carefully, tried to find the flaw where this miracle would collapse into reality. But there was no flaw. Only men working with coordination, assembling bridges from components manufactured far away, designed so perfectly that field assembly required nothing but following numbers and tightening bolts. They're not building, von Eisenhardt said aloud. They're installing. The distinction was crucial. Building required engineering. Installing just required instructions. A crane broke down at the main site. Von Eisenhardt expected them to stop. Instead, Morrison radioed, "Crane 2 en route ETA 40 minutes. They had backup equipment. Of course they did. Von Eisenhardt thought about his demolition. 3 tons of explosives. Perfect execution. Mathematical certainty this crossing would require months to restore. But he'd calculated for a world where bridges were built, engineered from raw materials, customized to terrain. He hadn't calculated for bridges that came pre-made in boxes. That was his mistake. At 5:47 a.m., a test locomotive crossed the first bridge. Tad collapsed on frozen ground, hands bleeding, body shaking with exhaustion. Morrison appeared with coffee. "Good work, Sergeant. I just followed numbers. That's all it takes. Birchwood, you know what you proved, that ordinary men, given the right tools and system, can accomplish impossible things. German engineers calculated 3 months. You did it in 6 hours. Not because you're smarter, because you had enough wrenches and a system simple enough you couldn't fail." Morrison drank his coffee. Behind them, the supply train was already crossing. "Get rest. We do it again tonight, 15 kilometers west. Different river. Same system."
Tad watched the train roll past, watched it cross a bridge that hadn't existed 7 hours ago. He thought about his father's tools, about scarcity and preservation, then about 47 toolkits in Truck 12. And he understood what it meant to fight with abundance as your weapon. Dawn broke cold and clear. Von Eisenhardt stood watching through binoculars as trains crossed his perfect demolition on bridges installed overnight. Holtzmann approached face pale. "Sir, what do we report?" Von Eisenhardt thought about words needed to explain this to commanders who still believed German engineering superiority mattered. "Report the truth. The Americans rebuilt Taupon in 6 hours using prefabricated components. They constructed 3 bridges where we destroyed 1. Sir, I found this." Holtzmann held out a paper blown from American trucks. A supply manifest. Von Eisenhardt read it. His hands began shaking. 47 bridge sets. In reserve. Just this sector. His notebook slipped from his fingers, falling into mud. Pages of calculations, stress analyses, demolition timing. 3 months of precise German engineering. Meaningless. The Americans hadn't planned to overcome his demolition. They'd planned to ignore it entirely. "We didn't just lose this bridge," von Eisenhardt said quietly. "We lost the entire concept of strategic delay. You cannot delay an enemy that carries solutions in their trucks." He turned from the valley. Behind him the locomotive's whistle sang, a long, clear note announcing passage across the impossible. "We lost this war before the first shot," von Eisenhardt said. "We lost it in their factories. The battlefield is just where they collect victory." He walked back toward his company, and he did not look again. The sun rose over Belgium. Trains carried ammunition west, and Thaddeus Birchwood, farm boy who'd never built a bridge, sat understanding he'd witnessed the future. A future where problems were solved through systems not genius, through abundance not scarcity, through enough wrenches for everyone who needed one. Good enough had beaten perfect, and it had done it overnight. 2 days later, Caspar von Eisenhardt demolished the Erft River crossing with every explosive he had left. This time, no mistakes. 3 tons into the bridge underwater mines on pylons, secondary charges, collapsing both riverbanks. The Erft ran fast with snowmelt 7 kilometers per hour, carrying ice chunks carving at unstable shores. Perfect demolition. Textbook work. Von Eisenhardt watched the main span lift and collapse into churning water. The pylons shattered at their foundations. Approach embankments dissolved in cascades of mud. "Sir, American columns approaching. 3 hours out. Good. Let them see what we've accomplished." What he didn't say. Time for what? The army was collapsing. But you still performed your duty, still executed orders, still fought a war you understood was lost. "The river's at maximum flow," von Eisenhardt told his officers. "Banks unstable. Even pontoons will struggle in this current. We've bought real time, perhaps a week." He turned from the destruction, already planning the next demolition, the next small victory in a war that had forgotten victory's meaning. Thaddeus Birchwood arrived at the Erft at 08:47 hours and immediately understood they had a problem. Taupon had been damaged. This was obliterated. He stood with Merrick and Denham studying the churning river. Bridge remains jutted from water at crazy angles, creating rapids. Banks collapsed into slopes too steep for vehicles. "Thorough work," Denham observed. "Germans are learning," Merrick said. "They saw Taupon. This time they complicated everything." Tad studied the current. "Pontoon bridge in this water. Difficult, but doable." Merrick consulted his watch. "HQ will have plans by 0900. Materials en route. We'll run 3 bridge types pontoon for immediate crossing Bailey, for medium-term permanent pile-driven for long-term. 3 bridges for 1 crossing." Merrick's face was stone. "Last week, a company near Bastogne ran out of mortar rounds because a bridge was out. German counterattack hit next morning. 83 men died defending a position they could have held with ammunition. 83 men, Sergeant, dead because of a bridge." He pointed at the river. "So yes, 3 bridges. Whatever materials it takes. Around the clock. We make damn sure no American dies waiting for supplies because we worried about overkill." The pontoon bridge went up first. Sergeant Kowalski, former Great Lakes fisherman, directed operations. Teams of 8 per pontoon, upstream team anchors. Let current help you swing into position. Tad watched the first team wade in, water rising to waist so cold faces went white within seconds. They drove stakes into the riverbed, fighting current, fighting cold, fighting water that wanted to sweep them downstream. When anchors held, they swung the first pontoon. Current caught it, tried to tear it loose. Anchors held, barely. Decking moved, metal sections placed, bolted, connected to bank approaches being frantically graded. 1 pontoon, 37 to go. Teams rotated every 15 minutes longer, meant hypothermia. Men came out shaking so hard they couldn't hold tools. Medics waited with blankets and coffee. Brief warm-up, then back in the water. Tad hit the river at 10:30, cold like burning, legs numb immediately. Current pushed with shocking force. Drive the stake. Drive the...
3 feet deep. He swung the sledgehammer. The stake sunk 6 inches. Again. His hands so cold he barely felt the hammer. Current pulling at his legs, making every swing an exercise in balance. 6 inches, 6 inches, 3 feet. Out! Next team! Hands grabbed him, pulled him clear, wrapped him in blankets. Coffee pushed into his hands. He couldn't feel it. "You're back in 10 minutes, Denham said. At 11:43 hours, the last pontoon locked. At 11:47, a test jeep crossed. At 11:58, the supply convoy's lead truck rolled onto the bridge. Pontoons flexed, anchors strained, water sloshed over decking. The truck kept going, reached the far bank, kept driving. 37 more trucks followed. Tad sat wrapped in a blanket, watching the convoy cross the river von Eisenhardt had made impassable. 2 hours, 14 minutes. "Not bad," Denham said. "Current here's a bastard. The permanent bridge. Look behind you." Tad turned. 50 yards back, another crew unloaded Bailey sections. Beyond them, a third crew set up pile-driving equipment. "We don't do one thing at a time," Denham explained. "Pontoon for now, Bailey for medium-term, permanent for long-term, all simultaneously, because we've got men and materials and time is people dying." Von Eisenhardt watched the convoy cross and felt something break inside. Not anger, not surprise, just weary acceptance. They'd done it again. Pontoon bridge in 2 hours across a river he'd calculated would take days. And they weren't stopping. Through binoculars he saw additional construction beginning. Multiple bridges, simultaneous projects. "How do they have so much?" Holtzman whispered. "Where does it come from?" That was the question. This endless abundance, this bottomless supply, this ability to throw resources at problems until problems drowned. Sir, orders, what orders they could attack, but American air superiority made that suicide. Another demolition further west would only delay them hours. "We withdraw. Nothing more to accomplish here." "Sir, we could what Lieutenant watch them build more bridges, document methods nobody will read?" Von Eisenhardt gestured at the worksite. "I don't understand. They're so wasteful. Throw away materials we'd salvage for months. Discard functioning tools. Use 3 times the resources necessary. Inefficient. Undisciplined. And yet they win. Because efficiency doesn't matter when you have abundance," Von Eisenhardt said slowly, working through it. "They're not wasteful. They're insurance-minded. They bring 3 times what they need because if something goes wrong with exactly enough, they fail. But if they bring excess and nothing goes wrong, they've only wasted materials. And materials to them are cheaper than time." He watched the worksite. "We think preserve resources. They think eliminate waiting. Different questions, different solutions." Von Eisenhardt made a decision. "Holtzman, I'm requesting headquarters detach us from combat. I want to study them, document their methods. Germany will lose. The question is what we learn from losing. Someone needs to understand how they think. For after. After the war. Yes, for rebuilding. Someone must learn how they accomplish the impossible to teach the next generation." "That feels like defeatism, sir." "No. Defeatism is refusing to learn because you're too proud. This is engineering, studying a superior system to understand its principles." 3 days later, von Eisenhardt walked into an American checkpoint with his hands raised. The MP seemed surprised. "You're surrendering because the war is over, and curiosity is more valuable than dying for a lost cause. I request to speak with your engineering command. I am an engineer. I wish to understand your methods." They processed him through a POW camp near Aachen. Clean bunks, adequate food, medical care, treatment bordering on generous. Second day, Lieutenant Roscoe Whitlock arrived. Young, maybe 35, engineer insignia. "Oberstleutnant von Eisenhardt, I understand you want to talk about bridges." They sat in an interrogation room that felt like an office. Whitlock offered cigarettes. "I have questions," von Eisenhardt began. "Ask." "Torpon, 6 hours. How? Prefabricated sections. Bailey design, British invention, American manufacturing. Factories in Pennsylvania making panels 24 hours a day. Ship to Europe, distribute to engineer units. When we need a bridge, we assemble components rather than build from raw materials. The planning, the coordination. We don't plan on site. We plan at headquarters using aerial photos. By the time crews arrive, we know exactly what's needed. Blueprints drawn, materials loaded, field work is assembly. And the materials come from factories. We've got production capacity that's Whitlock paused. Look, I designed bridges for California highways before the war. I know normal construction, but this isn't normal. This is manufacturing applied to warfare. I don't understand. We don't build custom bridges. We manufacture standard components and configure them to fit. Like, imagine building cars one at a time, each custom. Beautiful work slow, one per week. Now imagine standardized parts. Thousands of identical pieces assembled. Suddenly you're making 100 cars per day. Same principle. We industrialized bridge construction, but the resources required are enormous. That's the point. We make more steel than we need, more components than we'll use. Excess capacity means we never run out. Never running out means we never stop. Whitlock leaned forward. What would German engineering do if you needed a bridge but had no steel? Von Eisenhardt thought. Find alternative material, wood, or salvage steel from elsewhere. Adapt design to available resources. Exactly. Improvise. Make do. Find elegant solutions to scarcity. You'd probably succeed. German engineers are brilliant, but it would take weeks, months to design around constraints. Yes. We don't design around constraints. We eliminate constraints, make so much steel that scarcity isn't a factor, then design one bridge system that works everywhere and manufacture at scale. Is it elegant number optimized? Not even close, but it's fast, reliable, and we can repeat it without thinking. Von Eisenhardt felt something click. You've automated decision-making. Yes, exactly. Removed variables, removed choices. One bridge design works for 90% of situations. We don't waste time choosing the perfect bridge. We install the standard one. Speed over perfection. That's crude. Whitlock laughed. Crude as hell. My UCLA professors would be horrified. But it wins wars. They talked for 2 hours. Whitlock explained American logistics. Liberty ships built in days. Factories running 3 shifts. Production statistics that sounded impossible. We make more of everything than we can use, Whitlock said. Weapons, vehicles, materials, food. The excess goes into reserves, buffer stock, making sure we never run out. That's expensive. War is expensive. You know what's more expensive? Losing. We calculated maintaining excess capacity costs less than protracted war, so we overproduce. Von Eisenhardt thought about German manufacturing, the careful rationing. Strategic allocation committees. Complex bureaucracy, deciding who got what when. We couldn't do this. Even understanding the principle. Germany doesn't have the resources. No, you don't. That's why you're losing. This isn't tactics or strategy or soldier quality. It's industrial capacity. You're fighting a 1918 war. We're fighting a 1945 war. Different game. Whitlock stubbed his cigarette. Future belongs to nations that can manufacture abundance. Not morally superior, it just eliminates constraints that slow everything. No waiting for materials, no careful rationing, no agonizing over allocation, just enough all the time. Von Eisenhardt sat back. Through the window, American trucks moved past. Endless trucks, endless materials. We lost before the first shot. Probably, but not because you fought poorly, because you played a different game. You optimized for efficiency. We optimized for abundance. In attrition, abundance wins. Whitlock stood. For what it's worth, German engineering's still the best. But engineering without materials is just theory. We've got materials. Our engineering can be crude and it doesn't matter. He paused at the door. After the war, someone needs to rebuild Germany. If I were you, I'd study how we do things. Not to copy us, to understand the principle. Combine your precision with our abundance. That would be something. He left. Von Eisenhardt sat alone and thought about the future. A future where Germany would need rebuilding, where precision could combine with abundance, where scarcity thinking would be replaced by something new. He took paper and began writing. Not a military report. Observations. Lessons. A document for whoever would rebuild Germany. At the top, the Americans defeated us not with tactics but with logistics. They won by making winning inevitable through overwhelming material advantage. We can learn from this. Outside, American bridges carried American supplies to American soldiers who would win through simple arithmetic of abundance. And von Eisenhardt wrote documenting defeat's lessons so that someday Germany might learn to build instead of destroy. The war wasn't over, but the future was already being written. A future where wrenches were always available, where materials were abundant, where engineering served construction rather than destruction. It would take years, years of occupation and reconstruction and painful learning, but it was coming. And von Eisenhardt, writing in a POW camp while American trucks rolled past, was determined to help it arrive. May 8th, 1945.
Hamburg, Germany. Caspar von Eisenhardt stood in what used to be his city and saw total war rendered in rubble. 80% gone. Not damaged gone. The firebombing of 1943 had created a firestorm that consumed oxygen. People suffocated in shelters while the world above burned. Released from the POW camp 3 days after Germany's surrender, von Eisenhardt had come home. He picked through rubble-choked streets past buildings leaning at impossible angles. People moved like ghosts, thin, hollow-eyed, searching for anything salvageable. He found his brother's building through memory counting intersections because street signs were gone. The building had been 5 stories red brick, built 1887. Now a crater filled with broken masonry. Uncle Caspar. A girl stood in the rubble, 12 years old, maybe 13, wearing clothes too large, face smudged with ash. Margaret, his niece. Last time he'd seen her, she'd been 8 and laughing.
"Mama and Papa?"
he asked, knowing. She shook her head. February, the last bombing. Brothers, sisters. Heinrich in Russia. No word in a year. Greta died in 43 pneumonia. Klaus is with a Labour battalion somewhere. She said this without emotion, reciting facts. Where are you staying? Basement of the Schulze building, 3 blocks that way. 37 of us. Food. British rations sometimes. We dig in ruins. Trade. She looked at him with old eyes. Uncle, will you stay? Von Eisenhardt looked at his niece at the ruins, at hollow-eyed people searching rubble for nails. Yes, I'll stay. 2 weeks later, the sound of diesel engines woke him. Von Eisenhardt climbed from the Schulze basement into grey dawn and saw American trucks, 40 of them, maybe more, parked in what used to be Marktplatz. Men unloading equipment, organizing materials. A sign in English and German Reconstruction Team Alpha, Hamburg sector. They had destroyed his city. Now they would rebuild it. He walked toward the worksite. An MP stopped him. Halt. Business. I am engineer. I want to understand what you do. German military. Was. Civilian now. The MP consulted a clipboard. Engineers we can use. Got papers. Von Eisenhardt showed his release documents. Report to equipment staging. Ask for Sergeant Birchwood. Thaddeus Birchwood had changed in 5 months. Still the lean Iowa farm boy, but something in his bearing was different. Confidence or exhaustion, deep enough to look like confidence. He stood amid construction materials, directing crews with casual authority. Sergeant Birchwood. The American turned. No recognition. Help you. Caspar von Eisenhardt, engineer. They said report here. Birchwood studied him. Then something shifted. Wait. Oberstleutnant von Eisenhardt, Erft River. Yes. I'll be damned. Birchwood extended his hand. Heard you surrendered. Requested to study our methods. Von Eisenhardt shook. True. I wanted to understand the impossible. Nothing impossible. Just materials and systems. Birchwood gestured at the site. We are rebuilding infrastructure. Roads, water power, basic services. You're an engineer, you can help. Fair warning, we do things different than you're used to. I have observed your methods. I understand the principles. Then you understand we move fast and don't apologize for waste. Can you work with that? Von Eisenhardt thought about Margaret searching rubble for nails. 43 people sharing rations. Yes, I can work with that. Good. We need someone who knows the city, where utilities used to run. What's salvageable? You know Hamburg? I studied here before the war. Perfect. Grab a hard hat. Welcome to Reconstruction Team Alpha. The first project was water. Hamburg's system was destroyed, pipes shattered, pumping stations collapsed. The Elbe still flowed, but without treatment or distribution it was useless. Birchwood's team brought everything. Portable pumps, treatment units, thousands of meters of temporary piping. Their plan, install a temporary system, now worry about permanent infrastructure later. These pipes, von Eisenhardt said, examining them, not rated for permanent installation. Nope, they'll last maybe 5 years. In 5 years you'll need to replace them. In 5 years you'll have proper municipal water rebuilt. This is to get water flowing now. People need water today, not in 5 years when we've engineered a perfect solution. Von Eisenhardt helped lay pipe through rubble, worked alongside Americans and Germans, learned to think in temporary solutions and acceptable compromises. Third day water flowed from taps in Marktplatz. People lined up with buckets. Clean water. First many had seen in months. Margaret stood in line with a milk can. When she reached the tap, she filled it carefully as if it might vanish. Uncle, is this real? Will it stay? It will stay until we build something better. She carried water back,
and von Eisenhardt understood perfection was worthless if it came too late. Good enough right now saved lives.
The second project brought Lieutenant Otto Kriegstein back. 28 Bauhaus trained like von Eisenhardt, brilliant engineer who could calculate stress loads in his head. He appeared at the worksite on a Tuesday carrying nothing but discharge papers. "Casper, I heard you were working with Americans. I wanted to learn." Birchwood appeared. "Friend of yours. Former subordinate, excellent engineer. Can he follow instructions without arguing about efficiency?" Von Eisenhardt almost smiled. "Otto, can you?" Kriegstein looked between them. "I can try." "Good enough. We're rebuilding the electrical grid. Grab a hard hat." They worked on power lines, portable generators, above-ground cables. Quick connections an engineering purist would call sloppy. Kriegstein struggled. "These connections aren't weatherproofed properly. In winter, we'll improve them. Today, people need light. Power for cooking, electricity for hospitals. Today matters more than winter."
"But the proper way takes months we don't have. Otto, look around." Kriegstein looked, saw work crews installing power at impossible speed, saw generators humming, saw lights coming on in buildings dark for years. It feels wrong. Everything we were taught was correct for a world with resources and time. We have neither. We adapt. That evening, Birchwood gave Kriegstein a toolkit, American-made, chrome wrenches, socket sets, everything an engineer needed. "For you, you're working with us, you need tools." Kriegstein took it like gold, opened it carefully, stared with awe. "I cannot accept. Too valuable." Birchwood laughed. "Valuable. We got 300 more in the supply truck. It's just tools. Use them, lose them, I'll get another set. The cost is cheaper than you working slow because you don't have tools. Seriously, it's equipment, like a hard hat." Kriegstein looked at von Eisenhardt. "Take it, use it, learn to think differently." That night, Kriegstein sat cleaning tools with reverence. Around them, 43 people slept. Above generators hummed, providing Hamburg's first electric light in months. "They just give these away," Kriegstein murmured. "Tools worth a month's wages. They have abundance. They understand hoarding tools is more expensive than distributing them. Different system, different thinking. Can Germany become like this? Not like them. We're not America. But we can learn the principle. Abundance over scarcity. Systems over genius. Speed over perfection. Combine that with German precision." Von Eisenhardt paused. "That combination could be powerful. After the war, when we rebuild for real. We will have to. Germany cannot rebuild using 1939 methods. The world has changed. We must change with it." 3 months later, the Marshall Plan was announced. Von Eisenhardt sat in a converted schoolhouse listening to an American administrator explain. Billions of dollars, not loans, grants, money for rebuilding. Why help us? We were your enemy. The administrator answered carefully. Because stable, prosperous Germany is better for everyone than collapsed, desperate Germany. Because we learned from the last war that punishment doesn't work. Because we can afford to help, and helping serves our interests. But von Eisenhardt heard something else. The same principle from Erft River. Abundance as strategy. Spending now to prevent expensive problems later. He raised his hand. "I am engineer. Before war I taught at university. I would like to help coordinate reconstruction. Is this possible?" The administrator consulted papers. "Casper von Eisenhardt. We have a file. Surrendered voluntarily. Requested to study American methods. Currently with Reconstruction Team Alpha." "Yes, we can use you. We need German engineers who understand both systems. Your precision, our materials. That's the goal." Within weeks, von Eisenhardt had an office technical liaison Marshall Plan, Hamburg sector. He coordinated between American supply and German engineering, taught young Germans American methods, while Americans learned German precision. Kriegstein joined him, then others. Former military engineers, unemployed architects, students whose universities had been bombed. The work wasn't glamorous, mostly coordination, ensuring materials arrived when needed, translating between systems, languages, worldviews. But slowly, Hamburg rebuilt. Not the old Hamburg. That was gone. But something new. Wider streets, modern grids, water systems designed for growth. Buildings combining American construction speed with German quality. A hybrid, like the engineers creating it. Spring 1950, 5 years after surrender. Casper von Eisenhardt stood beside the Elbe, watching the new Torpon Bridge take shape. The temporary American bridge from 1945 was still there, still carrying traffic. 5 years beyond its design. But now, time for something permanent. The new bridge was collaboration. German engineering, American materials. Designed by a team including both von Eisenhardt and Birchwood, now a captain. They stood together watching crews place final sections. "You designed a beautiful bridge," Birchwood said. "We designed a beautiful bridge. Your Bailey taught me beauty and permanence are different values. This is beautiful because it will last. Yours was beautiful because it could be built quickly. Different tools for different jobs." "Exactly." A car approached. Diplomatic plates. A ceremony had been arranged. German officials, American military, press. Speeches about cooperation and reconstruction. Before ceremonies began, Birchwood pulled something from his jacket. A wrench. Chrome-plated, well-used, scratched. "Remember when we first met, Urft?" "I remember. I was terrified you'd recognize me from Torpon. Thought maybe you'd been there when we built." "I was. I watched through binoculars and didn't believe." Birchwood laughed. "Must have been something. Anyway, wanted to give you this. The wrench I used that night. Been carrying it since. Figured you might want it. As a symbol." Von Eisenhardt took it, felt its weight, saw the scratches, worn chrome evidence of hard use. "Why give this to me?" "Because you understood what it meant. Most people see a tool. You saw a philosophy. Abundance versus scarcity. Systems versus genius. You got it. And you taught others. Germany's rebuilding fast because you taught German engineers to think differently. That matters." Von Eisenhardt turned the wrench over. In Germany, before the war, a tool like this was precious. Inherited. Maintained for generations. Now German factories make them by thousands. We learned from you. And we learned from you. American engineers who worked here went home understanding speed isn't everything. That precision matters. That good enough should be as good as we can make it. Hybrid thinking. Best of both. The ceremony began. Speeches in German and English. Ribbons cut. Cameras flashing. First vehicle crossed German-American collaboration made physical. But von Eisenhardt barely heard. He held the wrench and thought about Margaret. 18 now. Studying engineering at the rebuilt Technical University. One of the first women in the program. She'd grown up in ruins, learned scarcity thinking. Now learning abundance. Learning to design systems instead of hoarding resources. The future in one person. 15 years later. 1965. Caspar von Eisenhardt. 65 walked across Taupon Bridge with his wife Anna. They'd found each other in 1947, both survivors, both changed. Rebuilt their marriage as Germany rebuilt itself. The bridge was busy with traffic. German cars, European trucks, occasional American military vehicles. The structure showed no age. Good engineering, properly maintained. A young couple stopped them, early 20s. The young man wore a Technical University jacket. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Professor von Eisenhardt from the Technical University?" "Retired. But yes. I'm studying engineering. My professor said you worked on this bridge." "I did. Several bridges here. This one, yes, with American partners. During Reconstruction. I'm writing thesis on post-war engineering. How we rebuilt so fast. Everyone says Marshall Plan money, but my research shows it was more. New methods. New thinking. Your professor is correct. Money helped. But thinking mattered more. We learned to build differently." The young man gestured excitedly. "Exactly. Before war, German engineering was perfection. Custom solutions. Afterwards, we learned mass production, standardization, American methods, but kept German precision. The combination created the Wirtschaftswunder." "A good thesis. You should speak with Captain Birchwood. He returns to Topon each year. American engineer who taught me to think differently. He's here now. Every January 17th, anniversary of the first bridge, at the memorial this afternoon." The young man thanked them and hurried off. Anna took von Eisenhardt's arm. "You still think about that night?" "Often. The night I understood we'd lost, but also began understanding what we could become." They walked to the center. Below, the Umblev flowed unchanged by war or peace. "Regrets?" Anna asked. "I regret the war. What we did. What we became. But the losing—" He shook his head. "No. We needed to lose. Needed everything destroyed so we could rebuild correctly. Sometimes you cannot repair something broken. You must start over." They reached the far side. A small memorial. Bronze plaque. English and German text. Commemorating engineers, American and German, who rebuilt the crossings. Who turned instruments of war into tools of peace. Beneath the plaque, encased in glass, a wrench.
chrome-plated, worn with use, carried across 47 bridges in 6 weeks, given as gift from one engineer to another. The wrench from Torpon, the wrench that rebuilt Europe. A tour group gathered. The guide explained significance, told the story of the overnight bridge, American abundance, German precision learning new methods. Tourists photographed, moved on. But one stayed. A young woman, maybe 18. She studied the wrench with intense focus. Von Eisenhardt recognized the look. Someone seeing not just an object, but an idea. "Excuse me," she said in accented German. "This wrench. It says 47 bridges. Is that true?"
True. I knew the man who used it. How long? 6 weeks.
Her eyes widened.
Impossible. I thought so too, but I watched them build bridges overnight that I calculated would take months. How? Von Eisenhardt smiled. The question he'd asked himself 20 years. Because they had enough wrenches, enough materials, enough of everything, and systems that let ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things, not through genius, through abundance and organization. The girl looked at the wrench again. "My grandfather fought in the war. Said we lost because Americans had more. More tanks, planes, everything." Partially correct. They had more. But more importantly, they used what they had differently. Built systems where individuals were replaceable materials, abundant speed mattered more than perfection. We built systems requiring genius and making do with scarcity. In a long war, abundance beats genius.
"You learned from them." "Yes, and they learned from us. After the war, we taught them precision. They taught us abundance. The combination built the Germany you live in." The girl thanked him and moved on, but von Eisenhardt stayed looking at the wrench. Anna squeezed his arm. "What are you thinking?" "About promises. That wrench represents a promise that there will be enough. Enough tools, materials, resources, that we don't fight over scraps, that we build instead of destroy, create instead of conquer." "Has the promise been kept?" "Here." "Yes. In Western Europe, in nations that accepted American help and learned American methods, the promise has been kept. We have abundance now. Not unlimited, but enough. Enough that young people like that girl don't think about scarcity, don't worry about tools or materials. They just build." That afternoon's ceremony was small. No politicians this year, no press, just engineers, American and German, young and old, gathering to remember the night the world changed. Birchwood was there, 73 now, still lean but moving carefully, still with farmer's hands and careful eyes. He and von Eisenhardt embraced like the old friends they were. 20 years, Birchwood said. 20 years since war ended, 25 since Torpon. We're old men. Speak for yourself. I'm well seasoned. They laughed. Around them, younger engineers mingled, Americans teaching in German universities, Germans working for American companies. Boundaries blurred. A young German engineer approached. "Captain Birchwood, I'm writing thesis on post-war reconstruction. May I ask questions?" "Sure, kid. The first bridges. How did you build so fast?" Birchwood looked at von Eisenhardt. They shared a smile. "No secret. Just materials and systems. We had enough of everything, so we didn't agonize over decisions. Need a wrench. Grab one. Section damaged. Use another. Crane breaks. Get replacement. Remove waiting. Everything moves faster." But the planning was done by systems, not individuals. Standard designs, standard components, standard procedures. Simple enough that ordinary guys like me could build bridges without being geniuses. The young engineer scribbled notes. "And you, Professor von Eisenhardt." Von Eisenhardt chose words carefully. "I learned abundance is a choice, not geography or resources, but a choice about how you organize production and distribution. America chose to build excess capacity, to manufacture more than needed,
to distribute widely rather than hoard centrally. That choice made them powerful. After the war, Germany made the same choice, built systems for abundance. It worked. So the lesson is build more. No, the lesson is build systems that assume enough rather than scarcity."
Design for abundance, plan for excess. Trust materials will come rather than hoarding what you have. Different mindset, different way of thinking about resources, work, human capability. The young engineer moved on. Birchwood watched him go. Think he got it? Perhaps, perhaps not. But his generation understands instinctively. They grew up in abundance. To them, having enough wrenches is normal. They can't imagine fighting wars over scarcity. That's the real victory. Not bridges, not reconstruction, but raising a generation that thinks abundance is normal, peace is normal,
Cooperation is normal. They stood together, two old men who'd been enemies once, watching sunset over a bridge connecting what war had divided. "My niece Margaret," von Eisenhardt said. "She's lead engineer on the new Rhine Bridge project, using hybrid methods, German precision, American abundance thinking." "The girl from the rubble?" "Yes. Grew up in ruins, learned to scavenge for nails."
Now she designs bridges that will stand for centuries. The transformation of Germany in one life. That's beautiful, Caspar. That is the promise of the wrench, that we will have enough, that the next generation will build instead of destroy, that abundance is possible if we choose to create it. The ceremony concluded. People dispersed. The bridge returned to its function, carrying traffic, connecting places, serving quietly. Von Eisenhardt and Birchwood walked to their cars. Final handshake. Promised to meet next year, though both knew at their age such promises were uncertain. "Thank you," von Eisenhardt said, "for teaching me to think differently. For the wrench, for the partnership, for helping rebuild my country. Thank you for learning, for teaching others, for making the partnership work." They parted, drove away in different directions, but the bridge remained, solid, permanent. A monument not to war or victory or defeat, but to the idea that ordinary people given enough tools and right systems could accomplish impossible things. That night, von Eisenhardt added a final entry to the memoir he'd been writing 20 years. The memoir his family would inherit. "We lost the war before the first shot was fired. We lost it in our factories, in our thinking, in our assumption that scarcity was destiny and genius could overcome material disadvantage. The Americans won because they understood abundance is a choice, that systems beat brilliance, that enough is more powerful than perfect. But losing taught us what winning never could. It taught us to think differently, to build differently, to organize society around creation rather than preservation, abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition." The bridge at Torpon was not just a crossing. It was a lesson about what becomes possible when you have enough wrenches for everyone who needs one. When you trust more will come rather than hoarding what you have. When you build systems letting ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things. That lesson rebuilt Germany, rebuilt Europe, created a peace that has lasted 2 decades and may last a century. The wrench was never just a tool, it was a promise that we would have enough. And that promise, unlike so many promises of war, was kept. He set down his pen, turned off the lamp, walked to the window. Outside, Hamburg glowed, a city rebuilt from total destruction, a city where his niece could study engineering and neighbors could work and raise children without fear of scarcity or war. The wrench's promise made real. And somewhere on a bridge in Belgium, a worn, chrome-plated tool sat in glass, bearing witness to the night the world learned that abundance beats genius, that systems beat heroics, that enough is the most powerful word in any language. The promise endured, and the bridges stood.